Good morning, everyone. My name is Elise Froman-Goodrich. I'm a Public Works Project Engineer, and I first want to welcome you all for being here this morning and joining and participating in the Water Rate Advisory Committee. We really appreciate your time and effort on this project. We have Libby Barg, who is our Public Works Outreach Consultant, and she's with Barney and Worth, and she's going to facilitate our morning here. And we also have John Ghilarducci, who is our Financial Consultant with FCS, which is Financial Consulting Solutions. Yeah. And so, Libby, with that, let's get started.
Great. I'm talking into a microphone. I don't know if you can hear me, but we are recording this first meeting so that there's two members that are watching it online, and also we'll put it online afterwards so the public can have fun just like we are going to today. I thought what we should start with, though, is introductions. Alita introduced myself and John, but I thought maybe each one of you could take a minute or so and let us know, give us your name, how long you've lived in Oregon City or how long your business has been here, and maybe just let me know what the funnest thing that you've done this summer. So for me, the funnest thing, I pretended to learn to golf this summer, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So if you guys want to take a shot at that, that'd be great.
Craig Danielson, Danielson's Hilltop Mall. I've been in Oregon City 64 years. And
wow, so
we visited Montana
years.
2 weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Thank you.
Garth?
My name is Garth Bidlick. I'm the plant manager at Providence Willamette Falls. I've been there for 2 years, been with Providence for 15 years. Actually a former Milwaukee resident, so I'm an Oregon City resident, but I work here, so that's good, I guess. Went to the Abbotsford Air Show up in Canada last weekend and got a little sun, and that was great. That's what I did.
Did you drive up to?
Yeah.
Great road trip.
Great drive. Seattle wasn't so fun, but once you get beyond that, even the borders were great. It was not a problem getting across. Take your passport.
That's great. Yeah, take your passport.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm Butler. Been in the area for a lot of years. Grew up in West Lynn. Live in Beaverton now, but have had property in downtown Oregon City for through parents and grandparents and everything for about 90 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, what about something fun you did this summer?
Went fishing for a week and a half up at Diamond Lake and Crane Prairie.
Oh, very nice.
I'm Don Slack, and I feel like a young guy here. These people own businesses for all these years. We've had our business, Settlers Corner downtown, for about 5 or 6 years, I guess. And I've lived in Oregon City almost 11 years. And I haven't done anything fun yet. I'm looking forward to that.
Really? There's
Well,
only
my
like
wife
2
and I
more
are
weeks of
caregivers, and so we've had a lot of intense older people this summer. So.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much for coming.
My name is Damon Mabey. I'm currently on the Planning Commission, was a former city commissioner, lived here all my life except for the 10 years I ran around the world with the Navy. Fun stuff. I finally got a job, yay, part-time, working in a warehouse. I get to go back there in 100-degree weather, so I got to find an air-conditioned job somewhere, at least for the rest of the summer.
Thank you.
My name is Kim Swan. I'm the Water Resource Manager for the Clackamas River Water Providers. We're a coalition of all the cities and water districts that get their drinking water out of Clackamas River, and I manage a source water protection and rechargation program on behalf of all these providers. And it's fun things. Had a fun trip to Idaho to mountain bike, and I leave for Ireland.
Wow, Ireland. That's great.
It's different than Idaho.
And then I thought maybe some people who are here can introduce themselves too.
I'm just a citizen.
That's great. Did you introduce yourself?
John Anderson.
Does everybody know you? Is that
Number of them.
number of them do? Well, welcome, thank you for coming.
I'm Gail Johnson, I'm the water quality coordinator for the city of Oregon.
Standard good road
Been
carrier.
here for a little over, well, in this job for a little over 14 years. And I am just finishing up a 2-week vacation. I just got back in town from a week-long road trip yesterday to Bellingham via Yakima and Winthrop and Hudson National Parks, and I'm well rested.
Well rested, well, welcome back.
I mean, I'd be very water operations supervisor. I've been here 15 years. We like doing a lot of kayaking, and that's my presentation.
I'm not sure.
Wyatt Parno, Finance Director for City of Oregon City. I've been here 2 months, so like Don, I've been real busy. Maybe this committee meeting will be the most fun thing we do this summer.
Right, I'm not sure if the microphone's working, so I'm going to sit down. It's against my nature to sit, but just so we have it on tape, I'll use the microphone here. The agenda, it's on your screens in front of you. We're going to talk a little bit about the committee assignment. John is going to give and he's not here right now, but he's going to give an overview of Oregon City's water system. Then John here will give you an overview. They're doing a study right now on water rates and a financial plan. It's not finished yet, but I believe you're going to get a little preview of that. And then we're going to open it up for questions and comments. And I want to ask all of you to ask questions as you go along. You don't have to wait till we get to agenda item questions and comments, because I know city staff is really interested in hearing your questions and your comments as we go along.
Hey, Libby, can I
yes.
say one thing?
Actually, you could introduce yourself, because I didn't have a chance to
Okay.
do that. So,
I'm John Lewis. I am the interim Public Works Director. And let's see, what else did you want to hear? You wanted,
something fun you did this
something
summer.
fun that I did in the summer.
Yeah.
Well, I just rafted the Deschutes. That was pretty fun. Probably the most exhilarating thing, though, was interim Public Works Director. Although, rafting the Deschutes was pretty exhilarating, too. Just a couple of things. What I just learned, I'm learning things as interim Public Works Director. Those monitors over there, we don't switch because you can see the screen. So everybody that's facing this way has the ability to see it from these, but these end monitors didn't know that until just now. The other thing is a reminder there's a little button in your microphone, and if you press it, you shouldn't have to press it, actually. It should be lit up as red right now. So just a reminder, if you talk, we are recording this meeting, and it helps. We might be able to see you talking, but if you don't talk into the microphone, we won't be able to hear you talk. So please do that.
All right, so on to the assignment for the sounding board. I think the best way to describe this is that the city is really seeking your advice on their water rates and financial plan and the city charter. So how sometimes people say, don't give people advice, unless they ask for it. Well, the city is really looking at you guys to ask the right questions, let them know what your values are around water system issues, what the community values are. So they're looking at you to really provide the feedback that they need to make this plan as best as it can be. And what your assignment is, there's 2 water rate advisory committee meetings. The one we're at now, and then in a couple weeks we're going to have another one, which will have the results of the financial planning effort they're engaging in. Participate in city commission work sessions, and most importantly for me, as the public involvement person working on this project, is advise our public outreach efforts so that we don't just engage with you and get advice from you, but that we're able to engage with the broader community. So, are there any questions about the assignment? Or John or Lita, anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think that sums it up really well.
Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Okay, I'm caught up a little bit here.
All right, I'll run your slides for you.
Okay, so Oregon City's water system and the value of water. I mean, obviously, we think you get a lot for your water, for what you pay for water. We haven't shown you, but maybe we will in the future, what the cost of water isn't compared to other things. But we think that it's a pretty good deal for the most part when you're looking at water. Across the nation, not just in Oregon City, but people don't realize the value of water. I think they take it for granted. We deliver it 24/7. That's not just delivery, that's also responsiveness. Our operations crews are available for response 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Hopefully we don't have to do that. We don't necessarily enjoy that part of it, but it happens. We provide water for everything in the city. So fire protection, if we have more manufacturing or we have to plan for more, or we'd like to plan for more manufacturing for commercial, we do that. Gardening, bathing, washing cars, our water's available and there for your enjoyment. So this slide is pretty straightforward, but I want to personally talk about water and how much it means to me and Eli and Alita and staff. I think it's pretty important that we're in that business of providing you water, and I think we've done an outstanding job of that. Part of that is planning, just like this. It's not just about getting the water to the service meter, although that's a very important piece. It's a lot about planning. It's a lot about emergency response. It's communicating with other agencies to make sure if the right situation comes about, we're prepared. We feel Kim's a good example of that with the work that she does as one of our Clackamas River water providers. She kind of staffs that and oversees that and coordinates a lot of that work. So we think that's important. All that in the name of kind of public health. So our mission is very important to us. And just because we're city doesn't mean that we downplay the importance of water. So we serve a relatively large population base. I think we're the second largest city in the county. We've got hydrants. The big number on here for me is the number of miles of pipe. 154 miles of water distribution pipe. That's the big pipes. I don't know if you've looked at the back of the room, but we're talking the main pipes that distribute. Off of that, we've got 11,000 water service lines and 11,000 meters. That's not part of that 154 miles. Yet each one of those has got at least probably 20, maybe 40 feet of pipe associated with it. And when you talk about replacement, the big pipes cost a lot, but the little pipes, you still got to do the work to kind of get between there and the meter, which can be fairly costly as well. We've got a fair amount of storage. Any future storage that we might need for future growth is paid for through system development charges, and theoretically that future growth. That's not what we're here to talk about today. Right now we've got 18 million gallons, most of which was bought through system development charges that new development pays. But now to maintain those and to continue to keep those in good order, that's more a rate issue. We also have 4 pump stations. Our largest one's Mountain View, which is up on the top of Malala.
Question.
Go ahead.
Can you go back one? You have 154 miles of pipe, but there's only 110 miles of road that you're maintaining, and water pipe gets to cut corners. Where's the other 40 miles of piping come from?
Well, some of it's in easements. I think that number's, I can't remember that number on streets. We've presented that before. 110 sounds light to me. I was thinking it was 130, but
when we were
maybe
going
that
for
was
the
including
pavement maintenance utility fee, it was 110.
Okay. I would say we do have some off-street water lines. We do have some parallel water lines in the same right of way. So we manage distribution. We also have some trunk lines For instance, we've kind of got parallel pipelines that run down Malala. One that the idea would be that we convey most of that water out to the Henrici Reservoir, but we also have some parallel pipes. So
So in some cases, you've got two water lines running side by side because one's a major supply and the other one's the local supply.
right,
Okay.
right.
Thanks.
But I'll check both those numbers, Damon, because I want to make sure we're right there.
John,
I have a question. I live up at off of Holcomb in the city limits, but I believe we get our water bill from Clackamas River Water, not from the city. Is that correct? So is that are these numbers? I mean, we live in the city, but are these numbers including the?
No.
No.
So the Clackamas River Water, they own and maintain their pipelines in addition to our pipelines. So the only kind of similarity, there's also a pump station up in your neighborhood and a reservoir up in your neighborhood.
And whose is that?
The reservoir is shared between the city and Clackamas River Water, so it's
Okay.
jointly owned. The pump station's theirs.
Okay.
That's correct, yeah.
So how much of the city is covered by Clackamas River? Is it a large section or just the section where we
I don't know the number of customers or the percent in terms of area. I'm not sure, but we can find that number for you.
Yeah, I don't know how important it is, but it's just kind of, when looking at this, I realized that there's some crossover of some kind there. So
There is. You really, for the most part, it's in areas. Clackamas River serves mostly the south area, but they also serve up above Park Place, and they go outside the city limits. The unique thing about Park Place is the elevation. So when they placed the reservoir in your neighborhood there, when they made that decision, it helped to serve some of your neighborhood and everything below, but then there's those kind of at the top of the hill who that didn't provide enough pressure to serve. So because of that, and because we don't own a reservoir higher than that, Clackamas River owns the reservoirs higher than that. So even though you've got that reservoir that's sitting there next to you,
right,
your pressure doesn't come from that. That's part of the storage. It's a low amount of your pressure comes there, but really your pressure comes from a higher reservoir that's outside the city limits. It's owned by Clackamas River Water.
So what we're talking about here affects my building downtown, but doesn't really apply to my neighborhood because we're kind of carved out of.
Well, keep in mind we serve Clackamas River Water. I didn't go back to the south end, but in your neighborhood, we first of all produce the water. That water is served to our pump station, which when we pump and fill that reservoir. So you wouldn't get water at that reservoir, nor would the rest of Clackamas River Water up Holcomb. They wouldn't get water if we weren't using our distribution system to get the water there.
Okay.
Okay. And then that's similar to what we have going on in the south end of town, which is out South End Road, out Beaver Creek Road. We wheeled that water, some of that transmission main moves water to the end of our system, and then at the end of our system is Clackamas River Water, and we meter that water from there.
Okay.
And so because of that kind of arrangement, as the city's annex, there's some agreements that we have with Clackamas River Water about when those customers become our customers, and it's a little bit mixed.
Okay.
Because they paid for those facilities and those meters and all that infrastructure, and as we annex it, there's some equities there that we need to make sure we follow. So there is a little bit on those fringe of the southerly end of town and up in Park Place. There's kind of some complexities that we weren't necessarily going to get too deep into. And I know I'm going to run out of time. That's the other thing. So I want to get through this. So maybe if we could hold the questions till the discussion, that'd be awesome. So this basically shows the water demand in terms that you may hear in the future. We use it in our master planning, but there's an average day, a maximum month, a maximum day, and a peak hour. So a maximum day is probably going to be a day like today, where it's hot outside, everybody's running their irrigation, they're filling their pools, they're doing everything they can. So today we'll probably distribute about 10 million gallons of water to our customer base. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know how much peak hour we might see happen today at about 5 o'clock, maybe 6, because people will be showering and doing everything else. So peak hour is kind of, so these are just, but maximum day we think we have got, and then the build out is also shown here. I guess the only thing I'd say about this is, again, keep in mind that build out is in theory going to be paid through future development. Okay. We get our water through the Clackamas River. I hope many of you know that awesome source. Still goes through treatment, but it's an outstanding source of water. So we get that. Just that intake is on our side of the Clackamas River, just outside the city limits.
No, just inside by 30 feet.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
It's close. Okay. This is really, I think, the only point out of this is we can, in the history has shown that our treatment costs are increasing somewhere in that 3 to 5% range, and what we're hearing from our treatment plant manager is that's probably that's gonna continue. And right now, our water bills include. You get one bill for water. It includes the treatment and includes the distribution costs. We're talking about, during this process, splitting that out so that property owners know, are you getting, how much of that is treatment and how much of that is distribution? Because of the way our water rate is set up, if there's increases in cost in treatment, we have to absorb that in the distribution. And we'd like to turn that around a little bit so that when the treatment plant has cost increases, there's a rate increase associated with that. You see it that way. And when same thing for distribution. And so we need to. That's part of one of the things that we're going to look at. Real quickly, we just adopted a water master plan. That's the document that's sitting here on this table. This is kind of the Bible of which we run by. It talks about our past, our present, and our future with water. It establishes a capital improvement plan, and it has some financial information in it. It's really kind of 9,000 foot level kind of review. We're going to go much deeper into that, but this talks a lot about our system, and it's available online. Other than that, I think. One piece that comes out of this is the recommendation, which I think is pretty important. With that 154 miles, assuming a life of 75 years, we think that we should be replacing 2 miles of pipe every year. And based on unit pricing that was included in that master plan, we think that's around $2.3 million a year. Here's the slide on pipe replacement. How am I doing on time? Just curious. Do we have enough time to talk through some of the pipe issues? Bottom line is, we've got a lot of cast iron pipe. There's pipes in the back of the room that we'll welcome you to take a look at. This is the inside of a pipe that's probably 75 years old. And you can see there's a lot of corrosion that builds up inside of those pipes. A lot of people don't realize that, but you get clean water through there because there's not usually a lot of velocity. If we're doing a flushing program and you watch our guys running trying to move water through the hydrants, you'll see a lot of rust and discolored water. Or if we have a water main break, many of you have been exposed to that, where we have a water main break, water's rushing through the system, we have to turn it off, de-water some of that, and the things get stirred up, and then all of a sudden you got problems at your faucet, right? So the main message here is our old pipes probably have a 50-year life. Our new pipes have more like a 100-year life. And so what's left, we're saying, the pipes that we haven't replaced in the last few years has probably got an average life of 75 years. And, the benefits to replacement are, to me, mostly about water quality, but they're also, usually we take smaller diameter pipes that don't really have the fire flow capacity, and we upsize. Our standard is an 8-inch pipe. What we're finding in a lot of the older parts of town is 2-inch pipes that are corroded, which Eli's got a really good example of that. And they're corroded to the point where it's almost like a service line. You might want to grab that pipe, Eli, and just kind of show that one off, because so when we go into neighborhoods, when we go in, especially in the McLaughlin neighborhood, we find these old pipes and they need to be upsized. It helps our fire flow. It helps our water quality. We definitely, once we've replaced it with a 100-year life, we're probably not going to go into that neighborhood again with a lot of maintenance activities. But this one we pulled off. This is actually right in front of your shopping center, one of the pipelines that we pulled out of the ground there. So I think the other point I would say is I think we've done a very good job with the money that we have for capital replacements to distribute that around the city and try to take on the projects that we think are priority, but are also, try to share the capital dollars that we have. So why are you here? There's probably one member on our panel who's not here today. It's Dan Holliday. He could probably give you the best background on this charter amendment. But basically, in 1996, the voters approved a charter amendment that continued with a water rate increase that really kind of stirred the public to amend the charter. And so they adopted this charter that allowed for a maximum of 3% rate increases over we could have done that every year. We didn't do that every year, but it established that rate for a 20-year period, so that at the end of that we would roll back to 20-year rates. So let me back up here a little bit because I didn't think through this slide too much. So bottom line is in 1994 there was a need for a significant water rate increase. I heard 62%. Is that right, John? 62?
I think it was 62.5%.
62.5%. So that decision was made by the City Commission in 1994, and there was a significant uprising. I don't know if any of you remember that, but there was people that were upset about that. And in that effort, they felt we needed to roll back those rates at that time. They wanted us to roll back those rates. But what we had done is we had acquired some bonds for projects, and the lending, the banks wouldn't allow the city to roll that back. So they sued the city so that they couldn't roll those rates back. So the judge said, well, you can't roll the rates back, but in 1994, you can change your charter to roll your rates back to 1994 rates. And there's some debate about whether or not that should include the rate increases, the 3% rate increases. But that's where we're at. So in 2015, we're facing this rollback. And so not only are we looking at a rollback, but we're looking at where our rates really should be. That's what this group is here to do. So in 2014, we will, at that point, have paid off those bonds, and we're facing, unless we take it to a vote of the people, a rollback, right? I don't know if I did a great job.
And I was going to say that there's you're in good shape on time, and so before we go on to the rate presentation, I'd like to ask if there's any questions or clarifications about any of the presentation about the water system or the rollback, the city charter.
Damon, you were going to...
Well, I guess to kind of expand on that, since this is going out to the public, I think most of us understand it, but in 94 they increased the rates dramatically, 62.5%, from like $3 to $5.20, which was compared to the 100 and something that Portland's paying right now. It doesn't look that bad, but 96 is when they approved the charter amendment, and then the judge that went to court because of the bonds already being let out. The judge said everything's legal except the rollback because you owe the bond issuers. When the bond's paid off, then the rollback can occur. So, that's, which is 2014. So what we're looking at is either snapping our current water rates back to 1994 or rolling it back, and I'm sure he'll get into it a little more, but or rolling it back to 1994 plus 3% for the last 20 years. But like most people who have knee-jerk reactions to public actions and create what they think is the solution by slamming something into the charter, they didn't look at the total consequences, and instead of just holding the public officials accountable, they held the entire city hostage. And so for all you out there who are trying to get charter amendments to solve your problems, that's not the solution. It just kicks the can down the road. This has been kicked 20 years down the road, and now we've got to deal with it. So,
Thank you, David.
Any other questions? All right, you're on.
Okay, so what I'll do is give you a little bit of sort of general background on rates, the process that we go through when we're doing a rate study, and then just touch on some of the specific conditions or factors that are affecting the study we're doing already that are specific to Oregon City, and will affect the results the preliminary results that we look at on the 28th. Excuse me. So our objectives when we do a rate study are generally shown here. The first one is to look at all the needs of a utility and make sure that we're generating enough revenue through rates to sustain the utility and make sure that it is fiscally healthy and remains fiscally healthy. We can only charge for services provided. We can't make a profit, so we look at the cost of all the water utilities services. We build the rates to recover only that cost. One thing you can also do, and that we will be looking at, is the rate structure. The rate structure is how we make sure that we're recovering costs fairly and equitably from the customer base. Who's paying what in order to generate those sufficient revenues. And then there are other sort of city-specific objectives that we incorporate into the rate study. Conservation incentives, if that's something that is a value of the community, you can build a rate structure that rewards people for conserving water. We always have to balance that against revenue stability, because the more you incentivize people to conserve water, generally the more volatile your revenue stream is, because they don't use water then at times, and that affects the revenue you get from your volume rates. We also, when I talked about ensuring that the utility is fiscally healthy in the future, we look at financial policies like fund balance targets. How much cash should you have in the bank? How much do you need to have available for emergencies? We want to make sure that those fiscal policies are being incorporated so we know the city's got money to handle unexpected events. So that's generally what we try to do with the rate study. The process looks something like this. And I'll just touch on some of the landmarks here, because I know that looks complicated, and they are complicated. But the first big landmark is that orange box near the top that says assess rate revenue needs. Another name for that is the revenue requirement. And what we're doing in that revenue requirement step is just figuring out how much money we need from rates in order to fund capital. You see the inputs into that box are capital needs, fiscal policies, and operating costs. So we're looking at the operating budget, planned capital expenditures, and then what makes sense in terms of fiscal policies, minimum balances, and those all play into our determination of the revenue requirement, or the rate revenue needs. That's going to be our initial primary focus, and we already touched on the specter of the rollback. There are some other factors that I'll talk about in a minute that are really critical to determining how much money we need from rates, that first big step. After we do that, the rest of a rate study really gets at the rate structure and rate equity. So once we have that revenue requirement and we know the percentage increase that's required from rate revenues, then we get into breaking it down into the different functional costs and services that the water utility provides. And those are shown here as customer. That's just customer service. Customer costs don't vary by the size of the customer. They're generally shared on an account by account basis. In the middle there, we've got average and peak usage or volume. These are costs associated with meeting peak demands, like John was talking about today. We're going to encounter peak demands on the water utility. There are costs associated with meeting those peak demands. Those are the costs that we're identifying here, along with just basic base demand. And then costs associated with providing fire protection. So we take that revenue requirement, we break it down into these functions, and then we look at the customer classes and how they demand those different functions. So just as a simple example, commercial customers have higher fire flow requirements, fire protection requirements, so they're going to pay a larger share of fire protection costs than single-family residential customers. Single-family residential customers peak more than commercial customers because they do outdoor, irrigation, et cetera. So they'll pay for more. Single-family residential will pay for more of those peaking costs. So that's how we break it down and then build them back up into rates that are specific to each customer class. And then where we in the final step, we bring in specific rate design issues like, this is where you could consider looking at block rates where the rate per unit of water actually goes up beyond certain thresholds of usage. And you usually apply those only to single-family residences, but that's not something that the city does right now. The current rates are uniform for all usage in the city, but a lot of cities and utilities are moving toward, we call them inverted block rates or increasing block rates, where the price of water actually goes up the more you use. So we'll be able to look at examples of that in later meetings. We won't have the rate structure rate structures for you on the 28th. We'll be focusing on the revenue requirements on the 28th. So some of the major drivers that you'll see reflected in our numbers. The first one is the rate rollback, and John talked about that. We understand it will take effect in October of 2014, which is fiscal year 2015, because the fiscal year goes from July to June. So our preliminary estimates are the rollback will be about 33% of current revenues. Now, one of the things we're discovering, and we were meeting yesterday to go through some of our initial technical analysis, there are different ways to calculate the rollback. And so I can tell you with confidence that these numbers are going to change. so I'm hopeful that you won't cast them in concrete. But it's not as simple as we thought it would be initially, because there's been a rate structure change since 1994, in addition to a series of increases that have been adopted since that initial 62% increase. But that will be the largest impact if it were to happen on the utility operations in the future. As you would imagine, that's a catastrophic reduction. Water purchases, they're forecasting 3 to 5% per year increases in water purchased from South Fork Water Board, and that's where the city gets its water. There is a potential for larger increases if Clackamas River Water were to go to a different source, and John described how the city provides water for Clackamas River Water. If they were to go to a different source, the price to the city of South Fork Water could go up more than that 3 to 5%, because city's demand would go down for their water. So that our estimates are showing that as a portion of the operating budget, water purchases run about 20, increasing to 24% in fiscal year 2016. And again, just to give you a sense of scale.
Hey, John, can I?
Yeah.
I just want to make
Please.
sure on that treatment question. The way I'd like you to think about it is, our water treatment plant operation costs what it costs, and as long as we're within a reasonable range of use of that treatment plant, those costs don't change much. Might cost a little bit more for chemicals, but until we get to exceeding the capacity of the plant, to run that plant is basically, there's a cost associated with that. So how we allocate that cost is really what if CRW quit using it, obviously we'd still have the same cost at the treatment plant with maybe a slight reduction because we wouldn't be using so much chemicals, but it'd be spread out across the smaller sales volume. So I think that's all we're really saying here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think I need to. Currently, CRW is contracted with South Fork to buy like 1 million gallons a day. If they don't buy that 1 million gallons a day, that's a loss of revenue to South Fork that doesn't come from the city. And South Fork Water is Oregon City and West Linn jointly owning it. So that $1 million of projected, or the 1 million gallons of projected revenue, because I'm not sure what the actual cost is, would have to be made up somehow in order to operate the plant. And the
Right.
only way to make that up is to distribute it to Oregon City and West Linn residents.
Right. That's
And
kind of
so-
what I was trying to say.
Right, but that's why South Fork's source of water is of concern to us. And that's not, we don't sell them all the water. That's just that's the water that we pass through down to the South End Claremont area that used to be a water district down there. So.
In addition, John mentioned the recently adopted master plan. It defines capital needs through 2022 to the tune of about $1 million a year. Of those, and those are just identified as funded. Some by rates, some by system development charges. So there is a small growth component to those projects which we can recover in the system development charges. But there's also a substantial amount of what we're calling system reinvestment, pipeline replacement generally, that we will be taking into account in our rate projections to show you, because you saw the needs of the pipes. This is an older system, and pipeline replacement is critical. There's a building reserve, a set aside that all utilities contribute to replace the Public Works Operations Center over time. That's not a near-term need. That's a savings account in order to provide for that. The charter revision from 1994-95 precludes the city from issuing debt, even revenue bond debt, without a public vote. So if that were left undisturbed, you'd have to go to a vote of the people to get debt issued again. So that will also affect what we do. We're going to, at least our thought when we put the slide together was we'd be looking at two sort of interpretations of the rollback. In one, we would roll back to 1994 levels, and then look at when the city actually did increase rates between 94 and today. And in those years that there were rate increases, then we would assume that those would still be effective. So if they were 3% or less, so up to 3%, we would use. So let's say the city adopted increases in the past 20 years 10 times. We would say those 10 3% rate increases are effective, and we would roll back to 94 levels plus those 10 3% increases. The other interpretation is that we can roll back to 1994 levels, and then apply a 3% increase every year of the 20 years, which would mean we wouldn't have to roll them back as far. And again, our very preliminary numbers for scenario 1 that we're calculating could be equivalent to a 44% reduction in revenue, fully effective in fiscal year 2015-16. And then scenario 2, a rollback of 33%. So again, I promise you these numbers are going to change because we're still refining what that actual rollback number will be, and it's a critical number. But hopefully you get a sense of scale, again, that it's a very significant impact. That's all I've got.
Do you have any questions? Comments?
I guess the third scenario would be to have the charter amendment repealed and have
Right.
no rollback.
Yeah, that was another one we talked about yesterday. We'll show you that as well. What are the needs, assuming the amendment could be rescinded or altered?
Are you going to share the water rate rollback presentation and water master plan presentation that was made to the city council?
We've been making a variety of presentations. We did it with the CIC. We did it with what else did we do it with the Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to go through schedule here to talk about other meetings that we're going to show that for them.
Maybe I'm not saying there was
Nancy
two
did.
reports that you had us read ahead of time.
Oh, right.
That were, and they had some different scenarios, and it seems like, and maybe this isn't the appropriate time, but it seems like everything is addressing revenue instead of addressing some of the expenses. And I would think part of our job would be to make a recommendation that sustains the system and allows for growth in the future, but also asks us to look at what the expenses are.
Okay.
And the difference, in my opinion, between I'll call it a utility and a business is the business looks at enhancing revenue and monitoring shrink, and then looks at the expenses.
Right.
And my assumption is, and maybe that's wrong, is we do have some people that aren't paying for their water. And that could help increase the revenue without increasing to the rates to the current people that are paying. So you widen the base. And maybe I'm wrong in that assumption. And then some of the expenses, if I looked at it correctly, we do pay the city a right-of-way fee or management fees and stuff. And one would think you'd look at the city as one big pot instead of a water pot and then a management pot and others. And I don't know if you're going to get into that later or not, but I think we have to look at expenses and broadening the base to make sure everybody's paying. And I'm assuming the city doesn't pay for water.
Well,
but
first
they
of all,
charge a fee.
That's the perfect kind of feedback we are looking for, because I think, as we look, we feel like we do look at those expenses, if you will, through the budgeting process. But the question of, and I want to make a little clarity on the recovering money from who maybe doesn't. The city, you're right, in many cases doesn't pay for its water consumption. For instance, when we water a park, or we read that meter, so we account for that water, but we don't necessarily send the Parks Department a bill for that. Right? Is that what you're talking? Is that
Well, that or I noticed the library, so I'm assuming City Hall doesn't.
Right.
I assume when it was the medical office building, they paid into the city water fund, but then when it switched to City Hall, it didn't.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's very much money, but how many other organizations out there might be that way?
Right.
And I'm not smart enough to know if we have meters on every customer or if there's customers without meters.
We do want to have meters on every service so that we can account for that, and I think what we need to do is do a little scrutiny on which of those meters is not actually, resulting in a fee, and then explain why. And if that's good judgment or bad judgment, we should just scrutinize that.
And have we switched to meters on every residence and stuff? Because I've been around too long. If I
Yes.
understand it, it used to be some homes didn't have meters.
Uh,
Now, this could be 50 years ago.
Yeah, inside the city, the city customer base, I know that's true.
That's
I'm
true.
not so sure about CRW where we wield that, but on every household we've got meters.
As far as we know, every house.
Yeah. Or if it's a multifamily, there may be a meter to that, or a lot of what we're noticing downtown is buildings that might have 5 tenants. We're trying to 1 meter and let the building owner deal with it.
And I understand it,
But we're
but at
trying
least
to
there's a
account for
meter on every person.
We've actually, and it used to be parks didn't have meters, and we've since, and one issue that every agency has is unaccounted for water, right? You buy a certain amount from the treatment plant, you distribute a certain amount, and there's a discrepancy between those, usually, a gap. And we've done a lot to try and narrow that gap with placement of meters on facilities, whether or not they're a parks facility or a facility like that that's not paying the bill.
And then I guess the final question, maybe not the final, but with South Fork, since the city owns a certain percentage of it,
50%.
if it's making revenue, don't we have a little influence over what they charge us? So does the city shift revenue from the Public Works Department and the Oregon City Water to South Fork so they're more profitable?
Well, it's not profit. Remember, that's the one difference.
Okay, so
But
the
it is-
costs are
but it-
shifted to Oregon City paying a higher percentage costs versus South Fork taking the costs.
Well, I think we, as active board members, South Fork is 2 commissioners from City of Oregon City and 2 from West Lynn, and then there's the plant manager. I think there are 5 boards.
It's 3, and the 2 mayors.
3 and the 2 mayors. Is that
Yeah.
okay? So in theory, again, we're looking at expenses at that level as well, and those increases are based on justified need, not necessarily just. It's not about profit; it's about paying the cost. Just like we're going to show you for our system, where we've got capital needs, chemical needs. We might have regulatory needs. All those needs tend to add up. Now, but we still need to make sure our house is in order, right? And that's what I'm thinking. I'm hearing from you is we need to make sure our house is in order when we talk about rate increases, right?
Yes, and specifically what you're hearing from me is if our piece of property has been there since '74, so that's 30 plus years. Every year we should have been paying in 1/75th of the replacement costs for the water system, so at the end of 75 years, the city water department can replace the pipe to us.
Yeah.
Is that making sense? There should be no free ride,
Right.
and I should be paying my portion of the replacement costs every year.
Yeah.
I shouldn't make it personal, but I should.
Right.
And it should go into a reserve that Eli and the people have to replace the pipe.
Okay. Yeah.
It shouldn't be somebody in 75 years have to do it.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
Couple of comments on that. First, basically what John said about South Fork bills the city. So while City Hall may not necessarily get a specific bill for City Hall, every drop of water that Oregon City doesn't charge a customer, they still pay for. So I'm just going to throw numbers out. They get a $5 million bill for all the water from South Fork that went to Oregon City. And if they don't find $5 million worth of customers, that gap that he talked about, the city pays. And typically it's, for city buildings and city parks and hydrant flushing and all those sort of things that happen. What's good is they've been metering the heck out of most of the city facilities so that now they know, we've lost, 100,000 gallons to a leaky pipe, a crack or something that wasn't there before because they can track what's going through the meters. before they started doing that, it was, well, I guess Parks watered extra heavy this month, and oh wait, now it's winter and we're still losing $100,000 and nobody's turned on a faucet. So it took a long time to find these things. So that is one thing that the city's done to increase the, I guess, pipeline security would be, or water availability. But while that's why I kind of wanted to clear up that City Hall doesn't necessarily get a bill where they write the check for City Hall specifically. The city does pay for the water they use. It just happens to be kind of the rest portion of the bill.
Damon, there are different pots of money. Are you saying that general fund pays or the water fund pays?
The water fund pays for the water.
So I think the question you're making is the city doesn't pay; it's the water rate users that pay. We're all part of the city, but I mean, when you start talking about who pays what, there are different funds, and there's sometimes it's not a game; it's a system of trying to make sure everybody allocates cost appropriately to who the users are within the city. But I just want to clarify: it's not really the city that's paying; it's the city water fund that's paying.
Right.
So okay.
It sounds to me like you're looking for some more information about how the money is collected and spent to be part of the conversation about the need around the water rate rollback. Is that correct?
And
okay.
some of that information was included in those two reports.
Right. Okay. That's great feedback.
I would say this about the two reports. They were, again, the 9,000 foot level, and since we have been presenting some of that information when we were at the chamber Tuesday, anyway. At that presentation, we used some little different slides here, and they showed some of those projections, but as we're getting more and more information from John, we're wanting to kind of refine that. So we probably will lose sight of some of that, but the one slide that I remember in there was just kind of the allocation of the expenses across, the various water treatment, salaries, general fund, support for general fund services. Those we need to kind of address that for sure.
I zeroed in. I think there was $450,000 that went to the city, either into right-of-way or management fees.
Yes.
And to me, 400 and some thousand is a lot of money. And is it the water ratepayers, or is it the taxpayers, or is it who should be paying for that?
Right. And if anything else, we need to make that clear and transparent, because it's not always that, right? It's just a number. The water fund, I mean, a lot of those expenses, it could be, attorney fees, it could be a lot of HR, those kind of general services that.
I'm not questioning whether they're appropriate or not.
We need to make it transparent.
Somebody needs to look at them, and you always want to look at your expenses, not just increase your revenue with a captive audience.
Yes, I get it.
The other thing that having worked through the pavement maintenance process a number of years ago, one of the things that really became apparent is to let the public know, if you don't do certain kind of things, what the future is going to look like. And so I think this has some of the same. I mean, you've got the rollback related to the charter, but the other thing is the citizens ought to know what their water availability or quality or all those other things are going to be if you don't invest in the future. And it's part of the story, is all I'm saying.
Right.
And I mean, we need to look at the numbers and make sure the numbers all work out appropriately, but we also need to let folks know that it isn't just about cutting money back on your monthly water bill, because you may feel good today and real sorry in the future. So anyway.
Thank you.
Alita, do you want to go over the schedule of what's coming up next?
Okay, so we've put together a schedule for the water rate study, the public outreach process, up to working with the City Commission, and then the City Commission considering what kind of direction they're going to go, whether it is the charter amendment to, rescind the current rollback, and and formulate a recommended rate structure. So in May through August, we have our two meetings. August 28th is our upcoming meeting for seeing some of the findings that FCS comes up with. And then in September, we'll have our first work session, September 11th, working with the City Commission and bringing up some of these issues. Hopefully we resolve, like the expenditures, have a good table for you on that, and start working through this dialogue of how the impacts of the rollback and what kind of advice we're going to get for the different rate structures and financial policies. And then in October, we'll have our second work session with the City Commission, and we're hoping that you can remain participating in that. And we're looking at then in November a public hearing, bringing it to the people. We would like to, city staff would like to meet with as many neighborhood associations and possibly business groups around the area to provide some of this information so that they have a good understanding as well. So going into that November public hearing, we do have a lot of the citizens having a good background on the water rate study, as well as all the implications of the water rate rollback from the city charter. And then we're looking at December for the City Commission to adopt a resolution for a charter amendment, and then in 2013 we would like to, as we've been finding out, the best way to approach a vote of the people is try and go in there one time and get the vote that that benefits the citizens of and with them having this good background on why they should vote whichever way. So May 20 in May is the vote that we're the election that we're looking at, and from the point of the adoption, it would be then up to the citizens and City Commission to go forward and promote whatever outcome they're seeking in that election in May.
All right. I wonder, is this working now? Can you hear that? Okay. All right. It had a secret button. And I wanted to go to question and comments. You've already had some great suggestions, but now is the time. There's some city staff here, and John and Alita. Is there anything that you heard today that was surprising or new, or were you all aware of it? Any advice for the city on how to move forward? Another question I would have is, we're coming back to you in a couple of weeks. What other type of information would you like to see or would be useful for you?
I'd like to have the chart filled in.
Oh yeah, the chart. What you have in front of you. Let me give you it's a draft fact sheet that we've been working on. The team has been working on, and we wanted to get it in front of you today to have you can take it home with you, spend some time, look at it. As you may well imagine from the presentation about how rates are created for cities, every city has a different rate structure. Some of them have finance fees, they have tiered water rates, and so when we are doing a comparison of different cities' average residential water use, we're still working to make sure that the numbers are comparable and most up to date. So we are working on that. We should have that shortly, and we will email you all the updated fact sheet that has those numbers. But we did want to get it in front of you today and ask for your help looking at it. The intent, I believe, of the city will be to send that out to all of your ratepayers, just as an informational piece.
Then along with that, I don't know whether it be part of our recommendation or not, but I would like to see like a potential block schedule for fees. And my assumption, based on what I know of the city, there'd be a residential, an industrial, and maybe an agricultural set of blocking, because I know there's a lot of, and I don't know whether agricultural would be considered, commercial, but I know that we've got like 26 farms that are inside the city limits.
Wow.
And they use water at a completely different, nurseries and farms use water at a completely different rate than, anything other than, I think, a chip plant. Well, the mill, I guess, used to use water at that rate. But those would be the three that I'd be interested in as far as breakdowns.
Okay, thank you. Anything here? Anything surprising? No? Do you think people, the general public, is aware of the charter amendment and the rollback?
If they read the paper.
If they read the paper, it's in the paper? Okay.
One of the things, this is fairly similar, I think it's been pointed out to the street utility fee, and that one of the points that I heard was we should be paying for what we need. What we should be investing, not pushing it off, right, to the future. I think that came to light with the street utility fee, is that we hadn't necessarily been doing that. We had a large backlog. I'll tell you that we have a larger backlog in water. And that's one of the things that I struggle with, is that 75-year life and taking that as an average. That kind of assumes that we've got pipes that are at average age. We've got a lot of pipes that are well beyond that. And, as someone who's involved, Eli and I and Alita, Gail, we're all concerned about, we don't like to be in the paper either. We hear about paper across the river over there. When they have a water line break, it's like, ooh, I feel bad for those guys. They're a little we know that they're a little behind the curve on their water rates. Their community hasn't been so supportive. We hope our community would be supportive, and we would like to, seems like a long ways to get ahead of the curve, but at least, what's a reasonable investment that the community can afford, maybe even at a stretch, but so that we can avoid too many articles in the paper about, or in public outcry about pipelines that are bursting. Alita pointed something out yesterday that I hadn't thought too much about, but when we have a water main break, it usually results in property damage, because we're on a hill. When it's, when they break, they wash out things, and so those things are never very pretty to do. And it'd be nice to be able to get at least a little bit ahead of the curve, kind of like what we made. I think the decision that we made with the street utility fee, which was, well, we still can't fix it all, but man, we can sure start making progress and develop plans based on a reasonable amount of revenue to cover those expenses. And I hope we get there.
Are we using some of our city newsletter opportunities or water bill things to tell some of these stories? I mean, in today's economy, a very increase of anything is obviously impactful to people who are, part-time jobs instead of full-time jobs or whatever. But and that's going to, in the newspaper or some of the, whatever. I mean, that gets played up as a headline. Those kinds of issues, but maybe before a vote comes down the road, we need to use some of those resources to begin letting people get their arms around what their water system is, because it's our water system as the citizens. I mean, it provides for our needs, and it isn't just about what the bill is. There's a whole lot more to it than that. The other question I have is, and maybe it's covered all in the SDCs, but and it goes back to jobs. I mean, do SDCs provide all of the infrastructure needed to bring industry into some of the areas that we want to see developed with jobs, or is what we're about here going to have an impact on our ability to attract jobs and industry and business into our community. Do SDCs totally do that, or is there some component of water that ought to be in the economic development master plan related to attracting jobs? Which is, I mean, that's the other side of people can't pay. Is, you know, if we're going to do something that's going to provide jobs, that can be a positive as well. So I don't know the answer to that question, but
I knew John and I could tag team on that, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, we are looking at system development charges too as part of the study, and we've taken an initial look at the capital projects that are planned. We're taking great care to protect the rate base from growth-related projects and make sure that those costs are being covered in the system development charges. The problem with SDCs is, as you know, is they trickle in over time. They go up and down as growth goes up and down. And there are times when you need to build facilities and not wait for your SDCs to come in and bank them till you can build. In that case, that's what leads to a debt issue like that. And you have to ask the ratepayers to help initially to be repaid by system development charges, so that the mechanism of them is a little awkward just because the cash flow isn't reliable. But generally, we're trying to keep those costs.
Well, this is related, but maybe it belongs in another city department. But raising SDCs can be a detriment to bringing jobs as well. I mean, if you get your SDCs out of whack with other communities, that is a decision mode that somebody's going to invest in your community could have. But, as a part of all this, maybe economic development or somebody ought to be looking at other funds from other places to make sure that we have attractive water infrastructure for industry to bring jobs here. And I don't know, maybe that's getting too far away from where we're at here, but when I came to this meeting, that was one of the things high on my priority list, is to make sure that we're an attractive community for jobs and for investment. So, and I'm not saying we do that in the rate structure, but somehow it seems like it needs to be covered somewhere, but it's a related issue. So,
absolutely, yeah.
Another question: with the transportation, you had an average life for streets, and then there was, I think, certain percentages on where you were with the life. It's so long going. Is there something like that for water?
Well, this might be for you.
You mean like that index,
the maintenance curve,
the index that we had for
that
the
index. Yeah, is there a water pipe index like there is a street? Because that was an easy way to sell it to the public, saying we needed to be at after 15 or 20 years, get up to 86%. Or whatever that percentage was.
And we also had the number at that time about if we didn't do something, what the ultimate cost was going to be in the future. Was it $1 million a mile to replace, as opposed to whatever the maintenance cost was going to be? So,
but that helped sell, I think, the fee.
I think what we could come to that might be close is age. I mean, most people associate. The older the water line, the more likely it needs to be replaced. And for the most part, our capital program is about pipe replacement. So I think part of the problem with the age is some of these pipelines are old enough to where we don't have good documentation. We know they were built before 1960, but we don't really know how far back. Although Alita pointed out, we've got one pipeline that's over 100 years old, one major pipeline, right? Age, maybe we could talk about average age of pipelines. That might be a GIS exercise that would be pretty. I'm wondering if we have enough of that detail in GIS to where it would be easy to produce for you, like on the 28th. I'm not sure, but that's what we do have is a pretty good list of future projects that are needed, that are unfunded, and where a lot of that is, it's based on those older pipelines that we know are.
And maybe that'd be the way. It just helps to have that visual
I get that.
On where we're going or not going.
Yeah.
And then the other, I couldn't tell by your slide if you ruled out a charter amendment for additional debt? Because you had that as one item, and you just said it. Because I think we should consider a one-time debt probably to help get the system up over a 5 or a 10-year period. But that's just my personal opinion.
What I was trying to communicate on the slide was just how things stand right now.
Mm-hmm.
If there were not some kind of action to change the charter.
John.
But I mean, that's a real good point. And I don't think it's known yet exactly what the charter amendment's going to look like.
Because
of
if
what
you
we
make
asked
the
for.
case, just like with the fire, the citizens, they are intelligent, and they can make good decisions for the city.
Yeah.
And, the fire was one of those. You just have to present the right facts.
So just to clarify, an amendment that would ask the voters to raise rates more than the 3% allowed, or
I'm not talking about if there would be debt issue.
okay.
So just like a $10 million bond to replace, to accelerate water main replacement or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
One question about, you say that there is, you're spending money to replace pipes now. Is that just on a failure, basis of a failure rate, or are you doing preventative maintenance where you know that a system is, needs to be upgraded because it's old? Or, I mean, you've said we need in the future to begin replacing certain pipes. Are you doing that now as a matter of what's in the rate or what's in the actual cost, or are you just doing things that have failed and need to be replaced?
We're doing a replacement. Yes, we're doing a replacement program now.
Okay.
And I would say that replacement program is underfunded. We're doing it both in-house, we're replacing pipelines, and we're doing it contract, we're replacing. So, for instance, there's a new water line on Ogden. We did that in-house this year. There's a new water line on Main Street. We did that using a contractor this year. And those were paid out of the water fund. The problem is we're seeing our operations costs growing, our revenues pretty flat. We're seeing this coming up, and that amount for capital is getting smaller and smaller. And with the rollback, it's gone. It's completely gone. So.
Yeah, I was going to. We have a public comment period. Are there any more questions here?
Just real quick. There isn't for pipes a maintenance thing that can be done in ground, like the streets. You can do the little 1-inch slurry seal and extend the life. Is there such an animal for pipes? It's either in the ground or it's replaced. And
yeah, I mean, a lot of our replacement program is based on places where Eli and Gail have been tracking problems, right? And we try and prioritize. Some of it's based on age, some of it's based on a record of breaks, and we've had quite a few breaks in that area. We need to move in there. Claremont in that area out there. One of the problems we're coming up against is now we've got the street maintenance utility fee, which lays out we've got a 5-year plan on where to do that. We really don't have. We know those water lines. Claremont is one example where we'd like to repave it. It's fallen apart. We also know the water line underneath that road has got a history of leaks and should be replaced, but we don't have the funding for that. What do we do now? It's kind of like, should we repair half the road and leave a little spot that we can tear up later to put? That doesn't make sense. It would really, at a minimum, it would be nice if we could have enough funding to marry up, the emergency needs, the pavement plan, so that we get ahead of those and do those, because we kind of committed to getting our utilities fixed before we go pave the road, right? And now we're bumping up against, we don't have the funding for that. So there's a lot of concerns for that. So
I was gonna.
You talked about replacing 2 miles of pipe a year. And to me, that's looking from what's been said, that's a cost basis that you're doing it now. What should you really be doing?
Good question. I think more. We looked at unfunded projects, and there's a huge, like I said, there's a big backlog, and I don't have an answer. I just know more. But we also know that we've got to get to a rate that's affordable, and so we want to we're going to show you some of those bigger ticket we're going to, in the future analysis, John, did we not talk about trying to include some number, at least the 2.3 million, 2.5, I think is what we talked about, for investment in the system? And it had a big impact. That was the thing that kind of scared us a little bit. It was like the road utility fee in that we had a much bigger number, you remember, and then we said, well, what's reasonable? And then I think even the city commission said, well, we need to scale that back even a little and ramp it up to what we really need. So we recognize the economies and what the community can afford is another thing, but we need to look at that number of what the real need is.
2 miles a year is going to take you 75 years, right?
Yeah,
I'd like to. We have 5 minutes left, and we have a public comment period. But I wanted to say, Elite has contact information on the back of this fact sheet. So if by Monday you could either email her or mark it up and mail it to her or bring it back, we would really greatly appreciate that. The next meeting is August 28th, and a reminder that September 11th is the City Commission work session. So I think we have a comment from the public.
Thank you. I also live in out Holcomb area, and so I'm on Clackamas River Water. And so I happen to go to their rate public hearings. And one of the things that really caused great problem and loss of credibility on the study was the fact that they didn't spend time outlining efforts to look at costs, which is exactly what Craig was saying. So I think that if you don't have some written balance with that provided, you'll lose credibility. The second point is a lot of cities will try to get in a cycle where they'll have debt service, and the debt service might be a 10 or 20-year cycle, but when the debt service is paid off for one issue, they plan another, because that holds the rate schedule for your operating costs plus your debt costs at an even level. And so I think about looking at replacing the current debt, and then how do you market that? You know, presumably you could keep the 3% in place and just go out and say we're going to replace the debt service. And what that means for the water payer is there's really no change. So I don't know that they're counting on this huge reduction in savings. They're accustomed to paying that. So if you build in some debt that mirrors that, or maybe reduces it slightly, that may help market that idea. So a couple ideas to think about.
By the way, John is my neighbor, and John doesn't give himself credit. He should be sitting here instead of me. He's retired city manager over at Troutdale, so he may have a little more expertise at some of this than I do. But
well, thank you very much.
So one of the, I know it's not on the slides, but we heard the comment about trying to get the word out, and there's a whole. Is that next time that you're going to talk about that, or I mean, you're doing a lot of that work for us, right? So do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to just say we're doing a lot of work for you and you want to talk about it next time?
We are working with Alita and John on a public outreach, public education campaign to get the word out to the public about the City Commission's consideration of what to do with the charter amendment. So as you know, there's, the first step is making sure everybody is aware of the water system needs and the charter amendment. It sounds like you guys all are very well aware of it, but we want to make sure everybody has a chance to have a baseline understanding of what the situation is, and then get some feedback from them on community values and what people want to see for their water system, what their expectations are for the water system. So we'll do that with mailings, with neighborhood association meetings. Of course, people read things in the paper, so we'll make sure that we're getting stuff out to the paper, accurate information to the paper. And we would appreciate I appreciate your comments and help with ideas on what we can do to make sure we talk with everybody about it.
One thing I'd look at is generally it's been really beneficial to put something in our water bill, you know, like, hey, the latest maintenance report's out and all that sort of stuff. But we clearly have people who aren't getting water bills but are in the city, so it might be useful to make sure that whenever you have something that they get a specific mailing from the city, you just fold it up and mail it to them.
So mailing not to water customers per se, because if you live in an apartment, you might not get that. So
right.
to
But they're still voting in
but
the
they're
area,
still voting.
so.
Yeah, good.
Something like this, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, whether it's mailed to every person or stuffed in the water bill, you need to still catch those in-betweens because like you said, the apartment manager who gets the one copy for the 47 people who are voters,
Right.
that's an important 47 that we're missing for the information piece.
Okay.
When do you want to do the neighborhood association presentations that were mentioned? Because right now I know our neighborhood's beginning to plan for meetings in October and whatever. So, I mean, in fact, there's going to be a meeting Monday. So it'd be really wise to get a prompt to the neighborhood associations, asking them to be on their general meeting agendas because those are being planned now. So
That's a good idea. It's September and October, so we should start getting on those agendas right away.
Several of them only meet once a quarter. So.
Kim?
I guess we do a lot of work with the communities, and because I work with a lot of water systems, many of which have gone through rate increases in the last year, I encourage you guys when you're talking to the public to really avoid percentages because 3% doesn't sound like much. When you start talking about increases and rates that get into the double digits, people have this knee-jerk reaction. And we found, because we talk to all of our communities a lot when we're out, that when you're looking at a base rate and what those costs are, 3, 10, 20%, we're talking dollars in many cases. And when we have conversations when we're out there and say, well, 18% sounds like a lot, but that's less than $3. You can't even buy a latte at Starbucks. And people are like, oh, okay. So providing those dollar numbers, not in percentages and in ways that are easy for the public to wrap their head around what it means is helpful, we found.
Yep.
Yeah,
Great advice.
that's how that stupid charter amendment got passed. Everybody screamed 62%, not $2. Mm-hmm. It's 62%. Ah, it was $2. So
Was it $2? I was going to make sure we had that when we came back. What actually the rate increase was from 1994
I don't even
to
know what
96.
the dollars were. Because all the focus has been on the percentage.
So
it's
if percentages
it's great,
freak people out, so if we can keep it in something that makes more sense, then it provides better context for
The media uses percentages because it's exciting, but it's true. Dollars make more sense. Mm-hmm. No. Any other comments? I see it's we're over. I never allow that to happen. I'm sorry about that. It's 10
we
o'clock.
started 4 minutes late, so we're on
Okay,
time.
so we're on time. Thank you, Damon. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, and we'll see you on August 28th.